Excitement.
Creative.
Fantastic.
Courageous. Performative.
Eclectic.
Exciting.
Fun.
Aronoff, assistant professor in the RCH. The study abroad trip to Israel is a class, but it's also kind of in a category of its own because it's study abroad, and so it's hard to compare that to classes here. I mean, that was an experience. I mean, not only was it great to be, I mean, the people who went on the trip, there were probably 5 seniors. So I mean, it's directly relevant to your class because they were, Vinny was on it, Allie was on the trip, Zach, Andy, Becca Galang, and then the juniors who went also I kind of knew, and it was very, like, if I had picked the people to go, they would have been on that list. So I was kind of going with some people who knew me and I knew them, and so it was already kind of a cool situation. And then and being there, that was the time where afterwards I looked back and was like, this is what the RCH, these are the kinds of students that the RCH attracts and produces. I mean, you would have been very much at home in the trip, so I mean, like, it's those 5, but they kind of, to me, represent something about the RCH. And what it was just that we were doing lots of different things in terms of, kind of outdoor stuff, hiking and swimming and mostly hiking, but also kind of digging in the dirt and planting plants and doing kind of hands-on activities in nature parks. But we were also in the classroom, and we were meeting geographers and environmentalists and human rights workers, and so there was politics and the environment and anthropology and culture and all of these things kind of in our typical RCH kind of interdisciplinary fashion. There was a lot of stuff, and then of course archaeology, right? So we were looking at history and archaeology and seeing all these ancient sites and stuff like that, and the students just kind of absorbed it all and were able to integrate it and asked great questions, and all the people we met kind of commented how great the questions were. A lot of times I think our students knew more about, say, for example, the environment than some of the people who were showing us around, so they would ask questions, and clearly the people who were showing us around weren't anticipating such strong questions, and they never seemed bored. And I've seen other student groups on study abroad programs who are not RCH students, who, when faced with that variety of activities, maybe it's at an archaeological site, you'll see that they're not that interested because they're interested in the politics or they're interested in something else. And I never had that sense with our group. They were interested in everything, and they were able to bring everything together and ask really good questions. So that was kind of a cool thing to see. It was just kind of like, that was really RCH in action, halfway around the world. So that was cool. I think our senior seminar will be one of my favorite classes, because that's, I mean, having you guys in this last semester is really special to me. I mean, I think to me it's just like, I'm so glad that I've been able to teach a senior seminar at this moment, right? So kind of to bookend the whole experience. And that's both because the topic of the class is really interesting, and you guys have been doing a great job kind of with the discussions and the readings and lots of things, interesting things have come out of that, but also just to me it feels like a semester-long kind of celebration of the end. No, really, it does. I mean, it's been kind of, it's been a hoot kind of being able to work with you guys this last semester. My comics classes are great too. We were in a town called Eilat in Israel. It's like the southernmost point, and it's a port on the Red Sea. And we had gone there to kind of study, to look at coral reefs. So there's kind of a nature preserve for the coral reefs there, and of course there's a lot of threats to the coral reef from tourism and from industry in the area as the city has grown and stuff like that. But Eilat, and this place is kind of outside the main city where the port is. that main city has kind of grown, among other things, to be a little bit. Kind of a resort town, and it's got these kind of huge, mega, kind of almost Las Vegas-y kind of hotels that are really like over the top. And there's a boardwalk, and there's all sorts of nightlife and stuff like that. And so we had actually been, traveling pretty hard up to that point. It was probably about a week into the trip, and every morning they're getting up at, the students are getting up at like 7 o'clock in the morning. That was, Allie Spiegel was up every morning at 7:30, and then I was so proud of her because she really, it was hard for her, but she did it. So they had been working really hard, and I had planned. So we got there. We learned about the coral reefs. We did some snorkeling, and I had planned to do a dawn hike the next morning because there are like these beautiful mountains in the area. So I'm like, okay, we'll get up at some of the rangers said, we can take you out on a dawn hike. So I'm like, okay, that would be cool. But then I knew that a couple of days later, in the next place in our itinerary, we're going to have another dawn hike. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know if they can take 2 dawn hikes like within 3 days of each other. And we're near this place that's kind of Las Vegas-y, and so I'm like, okay. That evening, I'm like, okay, guys, we have this dawn hike on the schedule for tomorrow, for the next morning. But, I know you've been working hard, so I'm going to make that optional. If you want to come on the dawn hike, you can. If not, that's okay. And tonight, you kind of have the night off. Our bus driver, Pinchas, will take you into town, and you can just like do the town. And just, I was like, oh, you can see what kind of mainstream tourism is, and this is part of the dangers of the coral reef. But really, it was like, okay, go and have fun and just kind of blow off some steam or whatever. So I thought for sure that the next morning, like, no one would show up on the dawn hike. Next morning, almost everybody in the group showed up for the hike. And I think almost no one had gone into town to just blow off. And actually, I think all the seniors were there. Vinny was there, Andy, Becca, and Zach, like Allie was there. And I just remember that morning being like, wow. They were given the choice between getting up at dawn and hiking in the mountains and going and just like, they could have done any, dancing, drinking, whatever. And I was like, this is meaningful that they chose to do this rather than the other. And that was one of those moments where I'm like, it wasn't just about those students. I was like, that's something indicative about the RCH.